Welcome everyone to our Wednesday, February 17th, North Middlesex Council meeting. Once again, it is being held virtual. If you are wanting to follow the meeting, you can see it on the North Middlesex YouTube channel. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order. Roll call. I believe we have everyone here. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. If you have any, please put it in writing to our clerk, either before the meeting or as soon as you see that you have one. Minutes of the previous meeting. Any errors or business arising from the minutes from the February 3rd meeting? Councillor McClinchy?
Under correspondence in the motion 0312-2021, my name is spelled again wrong, my last name.
My apologies. I'll get that corrected, Doreen.
That's okay. I just thought that. Oh, okay. All right.
Any other errors or business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we need a motion to approve the minutes. Moved by Councillor Nichols, second by Councillor Moyer. All in favor? Carried. Public meeting, we don't have any at this time. Delegations. We have at 6:05, and I see that we do have Tony and Darcy here. So it's Frank Cowan Insurance for the 2021 insurance program, presented by Darcy and Tony Comiskey. So go ahead. Who'd like to start?
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. I will start. Good evening, Mayor Rott, Deputy Cornelison, council members, and of course, the senior management team. Once again, we are happy to be here to present the 2020-2021 insurance program for the municipality of North Middlesex. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank you for your business, and we are honored here to make this presentation tonight. Tonight, of course, as you've just been told, I do have a familiar face with me, of course, which is, of course, Mr. Tony Comiskey from the Frank Cowan Company. We are here this evening to provide you with a high-level overview of the program and present the pricing changes over the last year. Bottom line, we are here with a 12.7% increase in pricing over last year. The pricing changes that we see are reflective of the market conditions of this time and are not related to the claims activity on this account. Although it is important to mention that the favorable claims activity of North Middlesex has helped to keep this increase as low as it is. As a background refresher, the municipal insurance program is comprised of 3 sections, that being property, liability, and an automobile insurance fleet. The municipality insures about $48 million in physical assets. Those items include the arena, various community halls, sewage treatment facilities, as well as equipment, graders, tractors, and administration buildings. In conjunction with that, we offer a $20 million general liability package covering the various locations that the municipality insures, as well as the issues that may arise on the roads and out of ownership and operation of different properties throughout the municipality. Finally, there is an auto fleet with over 37 units on that policy, power units, on that policy covering off the liability and physical damage exposures that go with an operation, that go with the operation of a motor vehicle in the province of Ontario. I will now draw your attention to page 2 of the package that I did send to you. So that is actually the most colorful sheet there. It's called the cost analysis sheet. What you'll see on that page there is a cost comparison of the expiring term and the renewal term. The column on the right is this year's term moving forward. And you will note that not all lines of coverage have been faced with an increase. As you can imagine, the industry keeps hitting the municipal liability sections with increases. This is the line where we see the largest expense increase over last year. This is also where the industry as a whole sees the most claims activity. We see that in the first line with that increase of $25,690. The balance of the increase that we see is in the auto and property insurance sections. Auto insurance continues to fluctuate in Ontario, and that is evident here as well. The base rate on each unit has changed, as well as the auto liability sections continue to take a hit as well. Property rates continue to take a bit of an uptick Also, simply because of the cost of claims that we see, and of course the material costs that are associated with the repairs of those claims. The final net result is an increase of $38,043 over last year, or that infamous 12.7% that we talked about earlier. One important note that I do want to mention, there was a COVID credit offered in 2020 for the municipality of North Middlesex that resulted in a $9,410.04 credit to the municipal insurance account. At this time, we're, I believe, unsure of the offerings for 2021, as we are only 6 weeks into the policy term. It is something that we will continue to monitor and watch that situation, and any credits that do become available, we will bring administration's attention that we do get this applied for. I will turn it over now to Tony, just for his comments, again, on just some background on what's going on all around, just so that we better understand just what those increases look like.
Right on. Thank you, Mr. Elliott. So great to see some familiar faces, and by the looks of it, looks like a lot of you got to see your barber, because I haven't. I called him today and I got to wait 4 more weeks. So lucky for you folks, you get to see this beautiful mop. Here we are, 2021, and as Mr. Elliott mentioned, a very challenging year in the insurance industry. Great review, Darcy. That was excellent. Your worship, I'm going to focus on the top 3 reasons why we're seeing the municipal rate increases. This executive summary I'm about to speak to, I basically accumulated this information from dozens of other council meetings based on councilors' questions. So it should take me about 5 minutes to get through this, and then I hope that leaves enough time for direct questions. Okay, so I'm going to get right into it here. So the number one reason why we're seeing an increase in insurance costs is the continued escalation of claims in insurance claims. This is a global issue affecting all insurers. Things just cost more: parts, labor, everything in general. There is a continuing trend that shows that we as a society have become more litigious and demonstrate less personal accountability, resulting in a higher frequency and severity of claims. In response, judges have awarded more contributory negligence to municipality versus plaintiffs. Damage awards are substantial. A number of years ago, it was alarming just to hear about a $5 million liability award, while today, larger awards are much more frequent. Court awards for severe bodily injury claims have increased dramatically in the last 10 years. Claims that have settled for $5 million just 10 years ago are now settling between $12 to $18 million. These awards are primarily driven by the cost of providing future care costs for catastrophically injured plaintiffs. Municipalities have a large exposure to this type and size of damage awards and are currently feeling that impact through the cost of insurance. The cost of defending a claim is also going up. Individual claims are more complex to defend, resulting in more time to manage the claim, with more detailed investigations, more experts, and more legal time involved in the process, of course at ever-increasing rates. Property losses are more frequent and severe. Climate change has resulted in a massive increase in property and catastrophic losses. Regardless of whether this has impacted the municipality directly, the escalation in the cost of claims has increased both property and reinsurance rates worldwide. Insurers have statistically seen more weather-related losses than ever before. So if you believe in climate change or not, I can tell you that the insurers simply do. Between 2009 and 2019, national severe weather losses across the country averaged about $1.9 billion. In the decades before that, between 1983 and 2008, the average yearly total for severe weather events was $422 million. Still substantial figures, but that gap alone speaks to how difficult it's been just in the last 10 years, and I'm referencing specifically property-related losses. My final point here regarding my first reason, Your Worship, is joint and several liability. This is still a significant concern for municipalities in Ontario. AMO has created a number of working groups over the years with the goal of reforming this law. There is currently a resolution being passed around multiple councils throughout the province addressing this very issue. As the severity of awards increases, so does the exposure to those who have deep pockets. And although AMO initiatives have not generated change, they have certainly increased awareness and the Frank County Company will continue to assist the municipal sector in lobbying for relief. My point that I'm trying to make in my first note here is that it's not just joint and several liability that's affecting municipal insurance rates. We have to deal with the cost of defending municipal liability claims that are going up. And we also have to remember that there's a lot more property and weather related losses across the country than ever before. So I've seen too many council reports where they're just blaming one thing, and there's a myriad of things that are affecting municipal insurance rates. I have two more points here, Your Worship. Low interest rates. So insurers have always used premiums collected to invest those funds in order to help offset claim losses. We are now over a decade of historical low interest rates. This has produced very poor results with very little return on those investments. Combine this with the claims cost escalating faster than the inflation rate, and insurers are now forced to further provide rate increases. My third point is the backlog along the court system, which I don't think a lot of people are really talking about, but this has really affected our ability to close liability claims. The longer an insurance claim is open, the more it will typically cost. With COVID, the court shut down just like everything else, with a system that was already backlogged. Add further delays to the second wave, and now we're just coming out of another lockdown. Matters that should have been settled within the year are being dragged out even longer, which brings me back to my first point about higher claims costs, specifically to liability claims. So those are the main factors I believe are affecting municipal insurance, specifically over the last 18 months. The last time the insurance industry saw insurers' adjustments rates like this was in the early 2000s. So it's been over 20 years since we've seen this last hard market in the insurance industry. And anytime you hear an insurance person say hard market, what they're referencing is insurers' appetite have completely shrunk for risk. They are not actively really seeking new business opportunities. They become much more strict in what they're insuring and for how much they're insuring it for. My final point here is I think the one positive solution going forward is to continue to migrate losses. And that's something that staff at North Middlesex, I think, have done an excellent job of doing, because either Darcy will reach out to me directly and say, hey, we have this new agreement, there's this new project, there's a new contract that they're entering into. Have a look. Are there any insurance implications? And these are the type of questions that either council or staff have to be asking themselves anytime you're doing something new or you're entering into another agreement with another entity is, are you protected? Those are the questions that could prevent an insurance claim from happening, because what North Middlesex is seeing today in terms of your rate adjustment is far less than what the average is currently trending at. And just to put that in perspective, the average municipal rate increase across Ontario at year end was around 30%. And your particular rate increase is less than half in that. So I think that speaks volumes of your continued attitude towards risk, because you guys are doing a great job of preventing those claims from happening. And you're obviously trending at a much lower loss ratio than municipalities of your size. So although your insurance is going up, it's definitely not going up as high as anyone else, not only in Middlesex, but throughout most of the province. So I guess that's my kudos to staff and council for having that attitude as you proceed with your business dealings and your decision-making processes. So keep up the good work. You guys are doing a great job, and no one likes paying more for insurance, but I think this is fair to say that with a 20-year market cycle, it was coming. We saw it coming at the end of last year. I know I mentioned a bit of it at my last time I was able to present to council. So with that being said, I want to give enough time for questions, Your Worship. So I'm going to stop talking and just wait for questions.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Darcy. Questions from council? Who wants to start? Deputy Mayor Cornelison and then Councillor Keogh.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Yes, so I have a couple of questions. I'll ask both at the same time, and then whoever wants to answer can do that. And looking at the spreadsheet here under property, I see equipment breakdown for the premium of $5,075. So that equipment breakdown, does that mean that if our grader or our plow truck breaks down, that's covered under insurance? And the other thing I have to ask about is, you mentioned climate change and the impact it's having on insurance rates. Can you give me an example of the type of claims that would go to a municipality in relation to climate change? Thank you.
Want me to take that, Darcy? So I can start with the climate change question. We actually had quite a few municipalities affected by significant flooding. And flooding something that's covered on most insurance programs, especially since the big Calgary floods that happened quite a few years ago. So I'd say flooding is the most common catastrophic natural loss that we're seeing on the property side. In terms of your first question, which please remind me, Deputy Mayor, what was that question again?
The equipment breakdown with the premium of $5,075, is that in order to repair the equipment that's broke down, say a grader or a plow truck or a backhoe?
Sorry, no. So the equipment breakdown policy responds for mechanical breakdown to, I'd say, like your HVAC systems, furnaces, your compressors at arenas, those types of equipment that have boilers. Typically, there's a specific policy that covers mechanical breakdown from an insured loss. So it doesn't apply to graders or fleet vehicles.
Thank you.
Councilor Keel?
Thank you. Hello, Tony and Darcy. Just a couple things that I'd like to ask. The $9,410 COVID credit, is that applied before the $38,000 increase or after the $38,000 increase?
So since I brought that up, I'll talk to that quickly. So that credit was actually processed in October of 2020. So it appeared throughout the summer season, just as the world continued not to spin properly. So there was a credit sitting on the account with our brokerage, we'll say, when the renewals were issued.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Sean?
Does insurance make sense?
Sure. Okay. So that really, that number,
It's one of those necessary evils, Darcy.
For sure. I understand that. And so the credit has nothing to do with what we're talking. I don't want you to mix those two numbers, right? So that 12.7% that you see as an increase is the hard cost from last year over this year. All other credits and other things that appear are not mysteriously factored into that. I don't want you to worry about that. That is a totally separate bonus that sits out outside of this equation. Does that make sense?
I guess it does. And
I think okay.
when insurance tells me don't worry about it, that makes me worry. I have another question then. Back about April 2019, at that time, Intact Financial partnered with Frank Cowan Company. So if that being the case, is that a benefit or a hindrance, fishing out of this bigger pool? It's always been my understanding that when you kind of merged with larger corporations, they would pass the savings on. But is that the case here? Are we seeing that? And I guess I have one more inquiry, and that is, should, in the event that we did have some type of claim of $300,000 to $400,000, would that, how badly would that offset what our next year's premium would be as a percentage? Is that something that we should be looking after ourselves? And again, would that inquiry count as a claim?
I can take that, Darcy, if you don't mind. To answer your first question, Intact purchasing Frank Cowan Company has actually been a very good transition for the Frank Cowan Company. I'll tell you why. Since that purchase, Intact has hired 16 new employees for our company. So we are growing. We are still growing. Frank Cowan Company is still a separate sister company of Intact. And I can tell you, with having a big brother, if you say, over a much bigger company overseeing our operations, we now have more capacity issue, meaning we can insure more municipalities across the country, which has always been our growth plan at Frank Cowan Company. What's really the biggest benefit has been we've actually been able to add a new subscribing company onto the risk. Without getting into too much detail, we have several different insurance companies that subscribe a portion of your risk to a program. And since we're a much larger organization, we were able to attract another company to take a small piece of that. And all that means is there are more opportunities to insure as municipalities grow, and as as Darcy alluded to earlier, there's close to $50 million worth of physical assets that we're insuring for municipality. That is a significant amount of capacity required to insure that much property. And that's just one policy, remember. So having that capability is going to help Frank County Company continue to grow. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's been nothing but positive. Typically when there's a merger and acquisition, you would think companies would try and lean out or do whatever they have to do, but Intact is doing the opposite. They are providing, like I said, 60 new people. We are growing, and I'm really excited about our future to not only continue to be the largest municipal insurance provider in Ontario, but I hope, at least within my working career, that I'll be able to say that we'll be the largest in Canada. So big goals, I know. Now, regarding the claim inquiry, our underwriters who basically price the risk, they look at a 10-year window of claims activity. So if you have one bad year, it's not the end of the world because we're basing our rates over a 10-year span. Okay. So if you can imagine, a $100,000 loss over a 10-year period won't really affect your loss ratios all that bad. Okay. Again, because they're looking at a 10-year window, not just a 1-year snapshot. So the longer you're insured with a company like us, the better it is because we're able to stretch out that ratio number based on the number of years we've had your business. Okay.
I'll give you what you want now. All right. Councillor Moyer.
Evening, gentlemen. Just wondering, when you come up with the rates for municipalities, is that like a general rate in Ontario, or are the urban centers, large urban centers like Toronto, Ottawa, London, are those broke out and then rural areas given a different rate? Or is it all in one?
Yeah, I can answer that again, Councillor. Great question. We do provide subclasses. So depending on the type of municipality you are, if you're a village, there's a minimum base rate that gets applied based on what every village that we insure has performed for that year and over that 10-year window I was alluding to earlier. If you're a township, it's the same thing. You're in a different category. If you're a town, it's, there's all these different subclasses that get categorized. And when I mentioned the average, that's why the average I think is so high, because you have let's say the City of London, for example, well, they might have like $1 million liability deductible program. So majority of the claims we won't even see. Whereas a township has a much lower deductible level. So we'll see a lot more claim activity. And just so you're aware, statistically speaking, townships historically have had the poorest loss ratios over the last 10 years, believe it or not. And I think it's because you have this mix of urban and rural settings. So you have a mix of dirt roads and paved roads. And typically townships don't pay as much premium as a larger center. So as soon as you have one bad motor vehicle accident claim on your books, that's say $1 million or $2 million, it really skews your results, it really skews your loss ratios. And like I mentioned, and in the area I service is majority of townships. And I always use that example because you can all relate, you guys have that mix of roads and you have different people traveling through your municipality, which could lead, luckily it hasn't, but it could lead to more catastrophic type injuries resulting in road maintenance or allegations of a lack thereof. But in short, yes, there are different categories we use to rate.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Other questions from council? No other questions? All right, having seen no other questions, I want to thank Darcy, Tony, thank you both for coming. As always, you're very good to work with. You've been very good working together with our municipality for the last number of years, and appreciate that. And thank you for your presentation. Thank you both.
Thank you, your
Thank you
worship.
too. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night. At this time, we do have department reports, and it's to appoint engineer on the Hill Cunningham drain and the Morgan drain. And I believe, John Lampman, are you doing that one? Okay.
Your worship, members of council, what you have in front of you is a report and recommendation to appoint Dietrich Engineering Limited as the engineer on the Morgan Drain project, as well as the Hill Cunningham project. Pretty straightforward. We go through these all the time. If there's any questions or concerns, go ahead and ask. If not, you have a recommendation.
Questions from council? No questions from council. I find it interesting that we're getting letters from the farmers who are on these drains in support of that. So that's interesting. If there's no other questions, we have a recommendation in front of us. I lost everybody. Councillor Hemming, Councillor Moyer, all in favor? Carried. All right. The next one is off-road vehicle regulation, provincial update. And Jonathan Graham, I think you're going to start that, aren't you?
Correct. Through your worship, members of council, the report that you have before you is seeking some guidance, so it's for discussion purposes. The recommendations to be considered tonight is that council accept the off-road vehicle regulation provincial update as information only, and/or council direct staff to prepare the appropriate bylaw to prohibit off-road vehicles within the municipality of North Middlesex's jurisdiction as identified under the Highway Traffic Act. A little bit of background: changes to the regulations pertaining to operation of off-road vehicles previously had been done at the provincial level. However, they came into effect or downloaded to the municipality in January 2021. To this effect, the municipality of North Middlesex should consider prohibiting off-road vehicles on roads under the care and control of the municipality of North Middlesex. Before I open it up for the floor for questions, I'd like to point out that two things: that the County of Middlesex evoked a bylaw prohibiting off-road vehicles, and that off-road vehicles are allowed to cross highways for agricultural purposes and/or emergency responses, as is exempt by this provincial regulation. So unfortunately, there is some confusion in terms of the interpretation of what's come down from the province. It seems to be, although we can characterize it by different vehicles, it's more of an all or nothing situation, because it becomes very confusing in terms of enforcement, and then the relationship that we have with the county as well. What's a county road in the eyes of the residents? What's a county road versus a municipal road? So those are the only things I'd like you to consider as we open it up for the discussion.
Okay, questions from councillor. Councillor McClinchy and then Councillor Nickel.
Okay, so would this still be under the Ontario Highway Act? Or who has to enforce this? I'm talking about these golf carts and all terrain vehicles. How is that going to be handled?
Through the worship, my interpretation from the previous order was that it was a blanket policy under the Highway Traffic Act that now has been downloaded to us. So the OPP and the police forces would have a benchmark to go to and say, this is not allowed under the Ontario regulation. With them lifting it, the bylaw will now shift to us from the province. However, the bylaw would be provided to our local OPP dispatch in terms of them being aware of what's prohibited and what's not prohibited. It would also allow our bylaw to issue tickets if they found it to be warranted, but that still needs to be defined through this new download, as it would be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nickel and then the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just a question. So I was reading the county bylaw, and you had mentioned about emergency vehicles and farming equipment. So when you're looking at snowmobile trails, for an example, crossing a highway, I'm presuming that's on private property where the trails are. I'm not clear if we would have anything like that within North Middlesex, where snowmobiles would be on a path and crossing a road in our area. Can you answer that for me?
Through your worship, I will try because it's a kind of a learning experience with this new regulation. So we do have a snowmobile trail registered in the municipality through a third-party provincial group. My understanding is it doesn't impact that group. And we certainly can investigate what a bylaw locally would look like in that relationship for snowmobiles, if that's the direction council's giving us. I would lean towards what the county has already demonstrated, where off-road vehicles can cross our highways. It's rather they can't travel parallel to our highways. So I hope that answers your question. We will, again, we're just seeking direction to kind of go into the policy, and I can certainly reach out to some legal advice and how we handle that relationship with snowmobiles specifically.
Deputy Mayor Ellison.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Jonathan, I have a couple of questions. One being some of these ATVs, like, you know, we have your standard four-wheeler, if you will, then you have your side-by-sides, and some of them are licensed and plated and they're insured. Would they then also be prohibited from using our roads?
Through your worship, my understanding is that if they're licensed and insured, that they are considered a vehicle under the Highway Traffic Act.
Okay. And Councillor McClinchy also brought up a good point about golf carts. We see a number of those, some in the rural area, but primarily in town for senior citizens that use them to get about. Would they then also be prohibited?
They would be prohibited, or they would not be allowed under this regulation if we go for the full off-road prohibiting them. So they would not be allowed.
Could they be on a sidewalk?
They can't be on a sidewalk either.
Okay. And then my final question is, and this is for other members of council, because we've been on here for a number of years. I thought that we had passed a bylaw a number of years ago, taking the ATVs off of our roads. Did we not?
Yeah. Through your worship, yes, we did.
So would this then replace that or renew it or change it in any way?
This is brand new legislation. So it's a different scenario. So if you recall when that bylaw years ago was passed, it was, I believe, an ATV group approached council about allowing ATVs. Their point was of being able to get to point A to point B and cross over the roads. And the problem being, they came with good intentions, but that bylaw was opened up in interpretation and meant some people took it that they could travel the roads, and they took it more than just the traveling crossing it. And then if you recall, I think the OPP then approached council and said that it was causing more of a liability of having that permitting them when there was problems and them having to apprehend that vehicle. So it was very problematic. And at that time, the county didn't permit it. It was just our municipality. So again, it caused a lot of confusion because as individuals, not always knowing what are actually county roads or municipal roads. And in this case, where the county has taken a lead on that and is prohibiting on their highways, it's kind of an interesting kind of turnaround of events of what this council needs to decide is whether they want to leave well enough alone and not have them prohibited or have a bylaw to prohibit it. So yeah, it's a little bit different scenario, but the same type of challenges I think you're going to encounter, or we have continued to really encounter over the several years.
Yeah, I know that after we passed that bylaw a number of years ago, there's been a significant reduction in my area anyway of ATVs out here, because I know they used to charter them up from London and down to Hungry Hollow and whatnot and use trails there, and that's no longer occurs with such frequency. Thank you.
Okay, just before I go to Councillor Moyer, Jonathan, can you confirm, or could someone confirm? You made comment that if these vehicles are licensed and insured, that they are able to drive on the road. Could we get confirmation on that?
I can, through your worship, I can certainly confirm that, but under the Highway Traffic Act, if you're licensed and insured, you're considered you're considered a vehicle.
Okay.
the tricky part, and I know I'm getting a little off topic, not off topic, but on the discussion point here, this is really framed, although they present options, it's really framed as an all or nothing scenario. Because if once you get into the classification of what is a motorcycle, a dirt bike, what is a four-wheeler, what is a four-wheeler with a seat on the back, it gets very convoluted in being able to enforce. The second thing that compounds this confusion is light fixtures on vehicles, speedometers and odometers on vehicles, which is a requirement for you to be able to have a license to begin with. That vehicle needs it. And then speeds as well. So how far do we go in terms of speeds? So the dialogue and that's happened at the engineers group in the county-wide is that it's better to put this in place so it's there than rather cause confusion in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed. And that's why the county took the lead in this instance. And I know the county had this thrown by their county legal, and they also were engaging the OPP through the process. And this is the recommendation that came out of it as well.
The only reason I brought it up is, I mean, I don't want us to talk here that, yeah, somebody has a side-by-side that's licensed insured, they can go on the road, and then the OPP, tell them they can't. So I just, if we can get some clarification on that, I'll leave it at that. Who had their hand up? Councillor Moyer, I believe. You had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. That was your question falls in line with kind of clarification I was looking for as well. Being that the side-by-sides and 4x4s are almost a staple of some farming operations with running from farm to farm and hauling wagons and such. So I think it's important that we do get that clarified, that if it is licensed and insured, that they are allowed on the roads.
So farm use is exempt. Farm use is exempt, Councillor Moyer, on this.
So if they're just driving from farm to farm, how do they know it's?
Yeah, that was exempt, that they were allowed, correct? I'm asking the deputy mayor, that's how that was, because that was a discussion there as well. Farming is exempt.
Okay, that's hard to clarify though when you get stopped out in the middle of the road. That you're.
My interpretation, through your worship, is that it's not only exempt through the county bylaw that we've used as an example, but it's also exempt at the provincial level as well.
Yes.
So we can't even tackle the prohibition of agricultural use. I know it gets confusing. I've been in that situation where an OPP pulled me over as a kid and said, "What are you doing?" And if I had a bale of hay on the back of it, I would have been fine. So
you have a rural address in?
When I was a kid, I did. Yeah. But that made it a lot easier, right? So it's the towns that they seem to be focusing on here.
Okay.
Councillor Keel.
I know that's been answered.
Oh, okay. You got your question. Any other questions on this? Jackie?
So through your worships, I had the opportunity when Jonathan was, he was developing the report, I did reach out to some of the other local tier municipalities to see what they were doing. And it's kind of a mixture. There's some that, I think there was a couple that had passed it. There's a couple that have no interest in it, passing it at this time, and a couple that haven't brought it to council yet. So it's interesting that it is not across the board. And I do think there's going to be some challenges that way, unfortunately, for the OPP and potentially bylaw enforcement, because it's not going to be clear across the county.
Okay. Councillor Keel.
Do we have any idea how many infractions we may have had in the last, say, 2 to 5 years? Is it significant amount to warrant opening this up, or should we just leave well enough be?
Through your worship, I would rely on the clerk for that, but I can honestly say I haven't had anything come across my desk in the 4 years that I've been here.
And through your worship, I don't know whether we would have that information locally anyway. Bylaw enforcement wise, I can say that it has been a continual complaints that we have in Park Hill in particular, and I think Councillor McClinchy will probably be aware as well, that the former railroad track does tend to become a speedway for four-wheelers, motorcycles, and I think again, I don't know whether this bylaw would change anything or make it worse. So out in the rural area, it's not the same challenges, it's being used for a different purpose because it's probably more agricultural out there. But in town, it has been a continual challenge for sure.
Questions from council? We have Jonathan, go ahead.
Just through your worship, just so that I could be clear with council, is if we don't have direction to, and we can still bring a bylaw forward, we don't have a bylaw prepared for you today for you to consider, but by not having a bylaw in place, off-road vehicles are subsequently allowed on our municipal highways.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Ellison.
Is that true? Because I thought the bylaw we put in a number of years ago took them off.
I'd have to, through your worship, I'd have to examine that bylaw, but there's a lot of other classifications of what these vehicles are. And Jackie and I would have to dive into that old bylaw. Certainly, if that bylaw is still active in place and covers even a portion of this, I think we're warranted that we have to go back and make sure it's up to date. Because with the province changing, but Jackie,
It was repealed. It was repealed. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely repealed.
All right. Other questions, comments from council? Because we have two recommendations in front of us. Councillor Nichols, go ahead.
Yeah, so if we ask for a bylaw and we looked at a bylaw, what would happen to someone who lived basically in town but owned a farm outside of town and wanted to use their four-wheeler because that is possible in very few cases, but a few for sure.
I believe, through your worship, I believe they would be exempt because it would be for agricultural purposes.
Even if they lived within the town.
And I believe so. We'd have to look into that. Again, this is all an evolving. I think this year, for people who've actually either put in the bylaw or haven't put in the bylaw, it'll be a very, very big lesson learned on where the gaps are going to be with this locally. And we want to make sure if we're going to consider either case that it's a right solution for North Middlesex. Kind of to Councillor Moyer's point, is it driven by address or is it driven by activity? That's, even if we define that could be considered subjective to the OPP officer that's enforcing it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Councillor McClinchy, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
My concern is come nice weather, I noticed 7 or 8 or 9 golf carts touring around the town. So how is that going to impact on things as well? Like, are we going to have our bylaw officer stop these guys and I don't know. And they have kids on it, maybe 4 or 5. Like sometimes there's 4, 5, 6 on a golf cart, and they're going around the town, up and down the streets. If someone fell off the cart, who's liable there? Like I'm just looking at different scenarios, and how are we going to approach that?
Okay. Go ahead, Jackie.
Through your worship. So my understanding is golf carts are not allowed under the Highway Traffic Act. They are not allowed on the road. They're meant for a very specific use. And we have seen it evolve over the last couple of years. Councillor, I agree with you. And most recently, I think this year, potentially because of COVID and just people trying to get out and about, I have noticed a significant increase in golf cart usage from a variety of ages. And that if there was OPP around, they would be, to my knowledge, they would be pulled over. This bylaw hasn't really got nothing to do with that, in my opinion, because they would never be licensed to be on the highway. That's not their purpose.
And Doreen, we have had cases, we have had cases where the OPP have stopped people with, and we've had more than one case where they've actually seized the golf cart. Mm-hmm. So, that's already in place. So.
Okay, if as long as people are aware of that they're not permitted, and they can have the card seized from them. So how do we get that across? Or do we put it on a website, or just to let them know that, you
That's
know.
the Highway Traffic Act. I'm not sure we want to get in the middle of it. That's-
Okay, well, I wasn't sure. It's
I
just,
don't know, thoughts on that, Jonathan or someone? I think that's a Highway Traffic Act and that's not really our jurisdiction.
okay, well, all
Yeah, I
right.
believe
So
you're correct.
Okay.
as long as people are aware it's under the Highway Traffic Act, it's a no-no. So,
Well, if it's the OPP they're stopping them, they'll let them know.
oh, yeah.
They have done that.
Yeah.
So we have, is there any other comments or questions? We have two recommendations in front of us. One is to take it as information only, or the other is to council direct staff to prepare the appropriate bylaw to prohibit off-road vehicles on roads within the municipality of North Middlesex's jurisdiction, care and control as defined by the Ontario Highway Traffic Act. What is your wish? Councillor Nicol.
I would like to see a bylaw drafted up for council to look at.
Are you making that a motion?
Yes, I am, sir.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor McClinchy, are you seconding that? Okay, seconded by Councillor McClinchy. Any other discussion on that? In favor? 4 in favor, opposed? 1, 2, 3 opposed. So it is carried. So we are going to get staff to bring one bylaw forward. All right, and then we can discuss that bylaw at that time. All right. It doesn't mean we enact it at this time, but the council or staff will work on getting us a bylaw. Right. Thank you. Thanks everyone for that. Passing of accounts. The accounts from January 29th to February 11th in the amount of $392,035.40. Where is Tracy? There you are. All right.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is recommending the payment of the bills and accounts in the amount of $392,035.40. Are there any questions on the accounts payable?
Questions from council? Deputy Mayor Cornelison.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Yeah, my question is for, I think it's Acon Canada for the Parkdale wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $83,430. Is that engineering or what is that?
Through the mayor, yes, it is. Engineering and design, Deputy Mayor. They're about 30% done, give or take.
Okay, you answered my next question. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing no other questions, we have, we're looking for a motion to pay our accounts by Councillor Keogh and Councillor Moyer. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Tracy. We'll make you work harder next Wednesday. Committee reports. Lake Huron Primary Water. Councillor Hemming, anything there? ABCA.
Yeah, we're having our general meeting tomorrow.
Okay. Blue Water. EDAC. Nothing at EDAC right now. The local school advisory.
We're making contact right now to see if we can get something going.
Okay, great. Great. Recreation Committee, Water, Wastewater, Councillor Moyer, nothing there. Policy review, we have a meeting next Thursday, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Fire Committee. Councillor Keogh, anything on that?
Nothing at this time. Scheduled meeting for possibly later in the month, 1st of March.
Is that for the building committee or?
It's for the build. Yes, it's for the build.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Cornelison, go ahead. You had a question?
Yeah, that was my question, Mayor Rob. I was going to ask the Chair Keogh if at what point they're at with the build committee and what type of building they're actually looking at.
So what we have, Deputy Mayor, is we have some just kind of roughed in drawings, something that we can all actually see, kind of get a flavor for. And at this point in time, it's just being pinned down a little more formal, and it's being sent off to Valley and Company.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, if I can, Councillor Keogh, there was the last meeting they had with the fire chief, Jonathan Graham. I attended it as well. Very good conversation. Very good conversation, I think, about what they wanted and just what doing going forward. I think so. Councillor Moyer and Councillor Nicol, would you agree on that? Like, I thought it was a a very good conversation.
It was a very good conversation, yeah.
It
Sure we
seems to
get
have a little bit more put on paper and
Yeah.
like just thoughts put on paper. So anyhow, we're moving forward.
Okay, great. Budget committee. So there's two recommendations do we have to do those now, those recommendations?
Yeah.
You have them in front of you? I just trying to look them up right now. Okay, so the first one is that the operations budget include the hiring of one full-time public works operator and one engineering tech contract person. That's the first recommendation. The second one is that the draft 2021 operations budget be presented to council on February 24th for their consideration and approval. So discussion on those two recommendations.
Yeah,
Councilor McClinchy, go ahead.
the one on the engineering technologist, is that a contract position? Is that a new position or what? Or is that a new?
So I'll just say that we did have a person doing that before, and she went back to school. So there was someone doing that. Aubrey was doing that. Okay, and remember, Glenn was doing some of that position as well. So we're putting that together. Jonathan Graham, do you want to speak to that, or Jonathan Lampman?
Through your worship, similar to what you're hitting on, it's just to complement that side of the department and the organization. As you're aware, we're moving towards a lot of bigger files, whether that be the fire hall, the pollution control plant, or incorporating some of the engineering design associated with the plans of subdivision that are on the go. So it's making sure that we have the proper staff at the proper time.
And in fairness, Doreen, if I may, last time when I went into the office, John Lampman's desk is piled up, and there's some things that I know that he has to get to on things that have been brought to us from development that need to go back to them. And yeah, it's just at this time with the development and everything. That's why it's a contract position at this time. Okay, Councilor Moyer.
How long would the contract be? Is it a year, 6 months?
Through your worship, I believe we structured it with it's more than 6 months. I think it might even be more than a year. It's just to kind of demonstrate value so that we can come back to council with what the value has been added to the organization in terms of if this needs to be positioned in its entirety. But we'll come back to you in a future date to determine that. Probably the next budget cycle.
Was it 2 years, Jonathan? Is that right?
John, do you know off the top of your head?
I thought it was 3, Mayor Rob.
3. It came to budget. It came to the budget committee, and I was trying. 3 years?
I thought it was.
Yep.
Okay.
I think it was more than 2.
Okay.
Was it?
Thank you. Councilor Moyer, you had your hand up again? You're looking.
Well, yeah, that seems like a long term, to be honest with you, for a contract position. I mean, and you don't evaluate them till after 3 years?
Oh, no, we have to evaluate them under labor law, at least at 6-month probation. As you are also aware, we're in a unionized environment at North Middlesex, so we have to be cognizant of the relationship that we have with the union. So we're trying to make sure that it's above board, but I'll have to get back to you on the length of the contract.
And
Okay.
I'm looking for it right now.
Gord, I think it coincides with some of these large projects that are coming up right now in the time frame, like for the Elsa Craig development, different things like that. That's why, but it will be you coming back to us at 6 months, Jonathan, is that right?
Most likely it'll follow a dialogue similar to the budget process.
Okay.
So later in the year, we'll be demonstrating the fit and the value that this individual will give us. And then as we go through the budget cycle, mainly for the water wastewater, we'll be discussing this position and whether we proceed ahead, whether the complement expands, whether the role expands, whether the need is there more or less, and then determine what the proper employment contract would look like after that.
Does that answer?
Okay.
Does that answer?
Thanks.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Cornelison.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. For the benefit of the people who are participating via YouTube and through the virtual council meeting, can we just give some detail to those people, members of the public, what the specific role of this individual would be and how we can justify the need to have this person?
Are you talking just for the one position or for both?
Well, for the one position, the engineering technologist.
Okay, all right, Jonathan?
Through your worship, it basically sums up to the demand that we have in front of us with the development files, which are 2 large-scale ones and incurring other site plans. The wastewater treatment plant, in terms of complementing that, large capital projects associated with the Park Hill Main Street improvement that'll be coming down the pipe. And then the wastewater tower in terms of the representation properly. So they will be required to prepare proposals of quotations and tenders, responsible for the preparation of cost estimates, ensure efficient project management as we sign contracts to engineers. I'm kind of spitballing here, investigations in terms of the quality of work that we're getting from our third-party contractors. Kind of just picking up some of the slack that through the transition of our organization, myself included, taking on new roles, and Jonathan Lampman taking on new roles, that we have the right staff complement. Being able to facilitate the benchmarks for our asset management plan and being able to keep that internal to ourselves. ArcGIS, AutoCAD, surveying, all those type of technical expertise that's required within the organization. Detailed design, draft review of planning applications. Jonathan Lampman, speak up if I'm missing anything.
Water modeling, sanitary modeling, storm meter locations mapping, storm infrastructure inventory, SANI, water, creation of capital tender, site meetings for capital, process progress plans, contractors, clients, like there's a plethora of things.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions on this? No, we have, do you want to do them separate? No, we have 2 recommendations in front of us. Do we have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Nickel, seconder. Councillor Keogh. More discussion? In favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks. Aqua Client Advisory Board, anything there, Jonathan?
No, really, no.
And the Joint Building Committee, we've already discussed that, right? We've expanded that. I'll call it, we've expanded the committee that will be getting our services through Middlesex Center, but so will, there's now 5 municipalities, including Middlesex Center, that will be working together on this shared services model. So, Jonathan.
Through your worship, previously we entered into an agreement for backup with Middlesex Center when we transitioned from Vic Stellingworth being our CBO until the Joint Building Committee had some legs under it. So a report and agreement will be coming back to council for their consideration and formalizing the relationship with Middlesex Center. But right now they're in a temporary appointment to us. So it's a cost plus contract. The rates are very reasonable, and we'll be coming to council in the future to finalize this.
Yeah, and we did look at a private provider, but it was very expensive. It was very expensive to go that route. So, anything else on the joint building? No, we'll go to go ahead. We'll go to correspondence. I think we're looking for the fire chief to come in.
Yeah.
Oh, there. Okay, we got Greg. Correspondence. The first one is motion of support Township of Baldwin, Township of Augusta, and OPSU, representing workers of Ontario, requesting province to reconsider closure of the Ontario Fire College in Gravenhurst. Greg, can you give us, we talked a little bit at the budget committee. Can you give us a bit of an update on that?
Sure. So what was announced to us back in January is that the campus of the Fire College in Gravenhurst is being closed down effective the end of March of this year. The Fire College will continue to be run out of Toronto. They'll continue to coordinate programs that will be offered at regional training centers, so various fire departments around the province. They'll also issue what are called learning contracts, so we can run courses here, and we have taken advantage of that at least one time now. We ran a pump ops course, and we can continue to run our own training. But what we're going to lose is the opportunity to send firefighters to the college in Gravenhurst. Sending firefighters to Gravenhurst has its pluses and its minuses. The pros were we got excellent training at low cost. It was $65 per course, plus, of course, mileage and wages. To send a firefighter now to a regional training center, where right now the closest one I believe is Grimsby, Fort Erie. So we're going to be looking at accommodations plus the fees that the regional training center charges. So between 200 and 400 is what I've seen so far. So our cost for sending firefighters away for training, which will still have to happen, will go up. But the fire marshal's office is framing this as modernizing training, and there is some value to that.
Okay, questions from council? I'm not seeing anyone, so I would ask you then, Greg, I'll start it off. So you're saying that, so I guess I'm looking to you as, what do you think is the best route on this? What do you think is our best way forward on this? How many people would we be sending for training at $400 a pop a year? And what's your thoughts, your personal thoughts?
Personally, there is an emotional attachment to the fire college. We have sent a number of people there. It gives you an opportunity to liaise with members from other departments of different sizes. Everybody comes back reinvigorated with all kinds of great ideas. And we try to take advantage of that enthusiasm as best we can. We are 4 hours away from Gravenhurst. We are one of the few departments that in the county that does send our members there. There's not a one size fits all solution to this. We are kind of, as I say, on the fringe of people who are willing to drive the 4 hours to get there. We can still offer excellent training. We have our partnership with Middlesex Center in Malahide. The options that they're giving, if they follow through, there doesn't seem to be a cohesive plan at this point on how they're going to deliver or establish some more local regional training centers. But we do have our opportunities now, and we will be okay with our training. It's just a matter of reprioritizing and making sure that we're giving opportunities to the people who are going to make the best use of them.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Greg. Other questions from council on this? Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Keogh.
My question is going to be around affordability, the cost. So, and you alluded to the fact that the cost will increase significantly if they don't go to Gravenhurst, that they're going elsewhere. Now, you did mention that some local training, but from the article that I read, it seems that the cost to send them elsewhere is going to be significantly higher, not just a little bit higher, but significantly higher. And what's your views on that?
Well, obviously, we would like to keep our costs down so we can send as many people for training as we can. The disadvantage to sending people to Gravenhurst was there's a lot of people who aren't able or willing to take a week away from their job or their families or young kids. As you know, our department has gotten quite a bit younger and we have a lot of familiar responsibilities. So if we're offering a course that we would have previously sent 1 or 2 people to Gravenhurst for, but we can offer it locally, and do it on a Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, we're going to have better trained firefighters. We're going to have more of those people. But it's an investment in our department, and it's an investment in our future.
What impact will it have on your budget?
It'll have a significant impact. But if we're not sending, if we're able to do stuff locally, if we're able to train people locally, and if we're able to partner with other county departments, which on a call I was with today, that they seemed like they were going to loosen up that restriction, then we'll be fine. There will still be some courses that we're going to have to send people away for. We did send one firefighter 2 weeks ago to Fort Erie for a driver training course, which we cannot offer because it is offered strictly through a regional training center that has an affiliation with the Ministry of Transportation. But when it comes to fire instructor or basic firefighter training, we can offer that here or through Middlesex Center.
Councilor Keel?
Yes, Greg, I was just wondering, when was the last time we've actually sent a firefighter to Gravenhurst?
I was there this time last year. We had probably 5 for sure, different courses that were canceled last year because of COVID.
So you had partaken in going to Gravenhurst, but how many firefighters have we taken on with the municipality in the past year?
So it's mostly been officer development courses and instructor courses that people have gone for.
So you don't find that there's any benefit with dealing with the local fire departments, whether it be Malahide, whether it be Six Nations, versus putting a person in the position where they have to take a week off work, we have to accommodate them, versus a Friday night, a Saturday, a Sunday perhaps, and we just pay their mileage, whether it be to Six Nations and back. You find that would be more financially beneficial?
Well, we haven't had the opportunity to have that fire officer training and that fire instructor training available locally. So we've had to send people to the fire college.
So do you not think with the absence of this fire hall this fire college in Gravenhurst, that there won't be a third-party provider fire up a clinic type thing and run 2 or 3 municipalities locally and put together a clinic?
If it's a third-party provider, they're not doing it. They're going to be doing it to make money, and it's going to cost us a lot more than $200 to $400. So there are still ways to get those courses. What's happened was when the fire college campus closed down in March of last year due to COVID, what they started doing was presenting some of the courses online. So you did your course, your fire instructor, your fire officer course online. Because it was very rushed, in my opinion, and from what I've heard, it was basically you were given the PowerPoint presentation to watch that would have been presented in class to you. But you're just watching the PowerPoint slides. There's nobody there filling in the backstory and giving you context and those kind of things. The things that you miss out on from just reading the PowerPoint slide. As this goes on, that will improve and the courses will be better online. And there will be blended courses where there's online and then there has to be some aspect of interaction. So the instructor course will require you to present to somebody, whether it's done online or you film yourself and you submit it to the instructor. It will all evolve. I don't have any concerns about that we're going to continue to get excellent training as long as we have our partnership with Malahide and Middlesex Center.
Councillor Moyer, you had your hand up.
Yeah, and Greg has answered some of the questions. I was just going to mention that online schooling now, secondary public school, that a lot of it has gone to virtual learning, and whether a lot of this instruction, instead of going to Fort Erie or to Gravenhurst or wherever, that it could be done online now. I mean, that's going to be a new reality.
Yeah, and that's definitely what's going to happen. The 7, I believe they said today, the 7 instructors who have been teaching at the college will now devote themselves to updating those programs, and they'll get better. And the frustrations that our firefighters across the province have dealt with in trying to do these courses over the past year, they'll be the guinea pigs for making that better.
Any other questions here from council? No. Thanks, Greg, for your input. So we have a consider a draft motion from OPSU or receive and file. What's council's wish?
I think receive and file, Mayor Rob.
Receive and file?
Yep.
Is that the consensus?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, receive and file on that. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks for all that information. Okay, FAQ, Conservation Authorities Act and Perth South response to Ontario government announcement for establishing a working group to focus CA. Receive and file. Any comments on that?
I think I agree with what you're saying.
Deputy Mayor Nelson, then Councillor Moyer.
Sorry. And legitimate concerns they have that the membership is strictly Conservation Authority people as opposed to members of the public or board members. So I do have I support their concerns there.
Okay. Councillor Moyer?
I was just voicing my support as well.
Okay. Are you making a motion on that?
I will.
Okay, Councillor Moyer?
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, Jackie, do you have that? In favor? In favor? Carried. Okay. Okay, notice of study commencement for the LHPWSS service area. We love acronyms. What is that? You know, because
Lake-
people are
Lake
listening to
Huron
this,
Water.
they don't know what that is.
The
Right?
lake-
I mean, we have people watching on YouTube. How are they going to know what LHPWSS is?
Lake Huron primary water, secondary, I think it's secondary
Supply.
service or
Supply system.
Okay, thank you. I just, you know, we do acronyms and people that are listening, they don't know what they are. And so any comments on that? We have actions receive and file. Anything on that? Nothing? County of Perth, motion support significant negative impacts of CBA assessments in Perth County. Receive and file. Township of Guelph Hermosa, advocacy for reform of the MFIPPA legislation. Once again,
freedom of information.
okay, so, you know, I'm just,
It's
we get
true.
used to seeing this and people listening don't know what that is.
And I can certainly spell it out better for future agendas.
Well, I was just thinking that now that it's, you know, people are watching into these, that we maybe should be putting the long-term in brackets. Thank you, thanks. The last one is Ernie Hardeman, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, update on changes to food premises regulation under the Health Protection and Promotion Act. Any comments on that? Receive and file. Councillor Keogh?
I did read through that as well as the other ones, and I maybe like to support that. It certainly does promote farm gate type businesses.
Okay. Making a motion to support? Go
Through your
ahead.
worship, I think that's just a receive and file.
Is it just a receive and file,
I
Jackie?
think
Okay.
so. I'm just going to it quickly, but I think it was just a letter outlining the,
Okay.
What's
Okay.
going on?
yeah, there was no motion support there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've made our motions on, well, as we went along. Other and urgent business. Consolidation and update of procedural bylaw 022 of 2021 draft. And Jackie, that's That's you, I believe.
It is. Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to point out some important highlights for council of the reasoning for the bylaw consolidation. So council will recall during last year, 2020, a lot of amendments to our procedural bylaw had to go into effect to enable the municipality to continue operating their business and having council meetings. And the amendments initially were meant for an emergency basis. So as long as we were in a declared emergency, that was part of the first amendments. And it was also to ensure that because we were going electronically, that council members were counted as quorum when not physically present. So initially, as I indicated, the amendments were covering emergency type meetings. Through 2020, it did become evident that electronic meetings were going to become part of the new norm, and we had to be prepared for that. And council is aware updates have been done through the council chambers to be able to allow us that flexibility of having in-person, hybrid, which could be partially in-person, partially electronic, or fully electronic. So the changes to the procedural bylaw are taking into account not only because of COVID, but because of the change to the new norm of how municipalities can conduct business. And these are reflective under the Municipal Act. One of the items I would like to highlight for council is when the amendments were put in place, there was provision for voting, proxy voting for council members. However, when that was included in your procedural bylaw, it was intended that there would be policies and procedures developed for how proxy voting would take place. So there's been a lot of conversation over the lower tier municipalities and as well as the county. And in the absence of having policies in place, it is recommended that we take out proxy voting at the present time. And one of the considerations I look at too for council is when you give somebody your voting proxy, you're giving that on a basis that you have all the information you have at hand to make that decision. And in some cases on agendas with motions, notice of motions, you would most likely have all the benefit of information you need to make a decision and then pass that voting proxy on to another member of council in your absence to vote in your desired favor of that particular matter. But I think you have to be careful with that voting proxy too, and because if there's not a policy and procedure, there could be public meetings that come up that there's a lot of information that is brought forward or questions asked, which could alter a decision that you initially thought was going to go one way. So I think it's really important to seriously consider voting proxy. And right now, in the absence of having that policy procedure, and also now I think having the electronic meetings does give a little bit more flexibility for members of council that maybe perhaps couldn't come to a council meeting, but they might be able to join electronically and therefore wouldn't have to give a vote by proxy. So my recommendation and how I created the bylaw in consultation with the county legal was leave that out. Council always has the opportunity to make amendments to the procedural bylaw, and every term it should be reviewed anyway when a new council comes on. And always, if there's changes under the Municipal Act, that would also prompt for review as well. So this bylaw was consolidated with the removal of voting proxy at this time. The biggest challenge too, and as we went through these amendments, again, we're in consultation with legal, we're trying to create and have procedures in place for public meetings. And that has probably been the biggest challenge in procedural bylaws is when you have electronic or hybrid meetings, are we meeting the intent of having the same benefit of having in-person public meetings? And through the development of this consolidation bylaw, it did allow to put more flexibility into the procedural bylaw. It provides a very good process for these public meetings, being your drainage and planning particularly, that we are trying to replicate it and give every consideration possible to make sure there's inclusion for the public as if they were meeting in person. And the bylaw was developed and the attachments to it. But if we also find we can improve upon our process even more, it's not going to have us go back and change the bylaw, because it's just changing a process in place to make it better. So this bylaw, the way it was developed, as I said, it does allow and recognize some flexibility that internally we can make process changes to improve our processes for public meetings in particular. So there was some minor changes in the process from when the amendments were put in place to how the consolidation is. So that's in there. Basically, your procedural bylaw, a lot of it comes directly from the Municipal Act, and it's just put into your procedural bylaw, but with some tweaking in mind of our smaller municipality and how things run. So we have the statutory requirements from the Municipal Act in there. It's tidying up some administrative numbering. So it's making it clear these amendments were very, you had to look at all the amendments as well as the procedural bylaw. Now that the consolidation has been done, it's one clear document that you can go through and find the different items in there that would be pertinent. It also recognized the change in time for the meetings for starting at 6 p.m. And again, that's always something that can be revisited by council. But again, as I said, most importantly, this consolidation has built-in flexibility to allow us to move through platforms and through the electronic to hybrid to in-person someday that we hope we get back to. It also is recognizing that we have included the recording of meetings and live streaming to our YouTube channel that council felt particular importance about, because it provides accountability, transparency, even more so than what we had before. And I think it was important to council to ensure that that carried on. So we wanted to make sure the bylaw, the procedural bylaw, was reflective of that as well. And the other item that of note that I would like to mention is also what we have found is technology is great when it works, but there are times when technology can break down through a meeting. The procedural bylaw, again, leaves the presiding officer, which is the mayor or chair of your meetings, to have that discretion to make that call during a meeting. So if there was a slight disruption, that presiding chair would have the ability to have a break in the meeting, see if we can get things back running. If we can, then we can carry on with the meeting. If it is felt that too much time has gone by, that we're better to reschedule, the business that's been taken care of stands, but we would move the balance of the meeting to another meeting. So again, it just speaks to that in the bylaw more that we didn't have before, and mainly because now the technology we have in place that we didn't before. So taking all that into account, and again, this was in consultation with our legal department, that we think we've come up with a very concrete bylaw, procedural bylaw for council's consideration. So I have got it listed under bylaws, but I did want to bring it up under this heading as well, just in case there was questions from council on it.
Questions from council? Questions from council? I do agree that the proxy, I don't see the need for the proxy voting either. I think it's even easier with our new hybrid system and virtual system. So I absolutely agree. Any questions? If not, we'll move on and we'll be dealing with this under bylaws. Okay. Verbal update, year-end pound keeping report.
Thank you. So again, as a yearly process under the Municipal Act, the pound keeping services report is to be provided to council. So you will see that we didn't have a lot of pickups over the year 2020. So that's always good. So there was 11 calls out for dogs running at large. 10 of them were redeemed by the owners. So when they are redeemed by the owners are responsible to pay costs incurred from the pound keeping. And so there ended up for the year, there was one adoption or one payout on behalf of the municipality. So overall, I think it was a good report, and meaning that there's not a lot of dogs running on the loose.
Any questions on that report? No questions. Our next one is the update on the water tower from SEMA. And who's doing, Jonathan Lampman? Are you doing that?
Yeah, I am, Mayor. Mayor, members of council, basically, I just wanted to update you on the cost and sizing of the water tower in lieu of future developments that are coming to Elsa Craig, and just show you what the impact was. So basically about $500,000 in upsizing and volume. Not all to do with that development plus another 1.5 to 2.5% growth for 20 years after it's complete. Just an update for you.
Okay, any questions on it? Councillor Moyer. And then Deputy Mayor.
Jonathan, this is just the water tower itself. This is not the lines running to and from. They would all be at an extra cost?
That's correct, Councillor Moore.
Yeah. Do you have any estimates on those at all?
Not yet, but we are getting into engineering this year, which will start to refine and define what those numbers are going to look like. That project is also growing in rough estimation based on conversations with the applicant for the development's engineer, as well as ours. And the size and length of the water main that we will be bringing from the water tower will have to get further into Elsa Craig because of the development.
Okay.
We don't have
enough. Yeah, really. Those two projects are almost one, really, because you can't have one without the other, right? So
that's correct.
Yeah, it's nice to have it's nice to have an update so we know what kind of the whole project's going to come to. But understand. Yeah. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Cornelison, you were next.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rob. So just to confirm, Jonathan, we are going to 2,500 square meter one?
So I think what we're going to end up doing is we're going to tender it out. So 2,500 is the recommendation that takes us, if you read that memorandum that was submitted, gives us like, I think the 2.5% growth after the current development plus everything that we currently have. That is what SEMA is recommending that we go with. Okay. Previously we were looking at, I think, the 1,900 cubic meter, but yeah, the 2,500 we're recommending.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Nicol?
Yeah, I was a little confused when I read that at one point near the bottom. It said we had I believe an option of changing it to a larger tower. Is that in the event that you put the smaller one to begin with in?
No, we make that.
Did I misread that?
Yeah, we make that decision right away and then bill it accordingly, right? So
yeah.
Just to make sense so everybody's on the same page, SEMA is saying we should be going with the 2,500 cubic meter in light of growth that we have in the hopper and then future growth for the community.
Okay, I definitely agree with that. I just was a little confused when I read that. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Hemming.
Yeah, more to Gord's point there about the water line hookup. The water line is not far from there to tie into, right? But the exiting going to town, that line is going to be changed. Is it going to be changed to a bigger line?
That's correct, Councillor Hemming. So right now it's fed with an 8-inch. And basically rough estimation that we're looking at right now is going to be a 12. And that will be to at least the north extent of the new development. Where previously what we were looking at for engineering design and so on was just to get it kind of to the north edge of town. But in light of what's obviously coming, we got to get it further.
Okay, thank you.
Jonathan Graham, go ahead, Jonathan.
Through your worship, I'd also like to just highlight that although this is an upfront cost that we're associating with, these are the type of dialogues that we need to have as association with our development charges and our development community at large, to make sure, lack of a better term, that we don't put infrastructure in and tomorrow we find out it's wrong size, it doesn't work. So it's a good time to have this conversation, but these are the projects that we can identify and offset from DCs. And I think that's more relative to the water line itself when the timing is in more appropriate. But we do have funding options as we go through this.
Okay. Any other questions on the water tower at this time? Not at this time. Thanks, Jonathan. Any other business? Any other business anyone has? Deputy Mayor Cornelison, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question actually, Mayor Rob, if I may, and I think it's for our CEO. And I was thinking the other day with the weather that we had and the potential for a storm, and I know that we had discussed warming centers, but what would be the status of that warming center should we have an experience like the are down in Texas right now?
Through your worship, I'd have to look back into the actual policy that we drafted for it, because we do have a warming and cooling station policy, but I believe the authority often knee-jerk can be collectively through the emergency management, but it also is exercised either through myself or through the mayor if that group can't meet quickly enough.
Okay, I was thinking more in terms of with the COVID and the pandemic and the limitations on people indoors.
Oh, you mean the actual physical space? Well, if we were in an emergency of that scale, we certainly would be diving into the CERB volunteer group, and we'd have to abide by all social distancing and masks and so on and so forth. But we do have that backup just in case in terms of the backup generators being there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other business? Seeing none. Deferred items are in front of you. And also, okay, communications, including county council meeting report. Adrian.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. I guess just a couple of things of interest. I'm not sure if members of council are aware that Morgan Calvert is now the CAO of Adelaide Metcalf, and Chris Bailey will be taking over as manager of IT services. County Council did approve the installation of the single lights in Park Hill that will be going in this year. And perhaps Jonathan wants to talk about it, but I think we had some discussion yesterday, certainly at County Council, and again today at our emergency management of a vaccination center in Mount Bridges, which may become available to our local residents as well when the time comes. So I don't know, Jonathan, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Through your worship, in brief, we were able to connect with the Middlesex London Health Unit individual who kind of oversees the vaccine locations and some of the parameters and being able to roll that out. Currently, Mount Bridges and the agro-food complex in London have been identified for the rollout. We went through a little bit of the baseline in terms of where Middlesex London Health is currently with this rollout, and they're still in phase 1, which is inclusive to long-term care homes, and the employees within, and that they'll be moving into the second phase of emergency response teams. And there is some question mark on terms of when that 80 and above age bracket will be going. The conversation was long overdue, and we were able to get some light in terms of what they're hopeful for. And unfortunately, right now, with the vagity of where they sit with the vaccine at the provincial and federal level, locally, it looks like our best alternative is if that they come to a one vaccine solution, and it will be rolled out in the same format as the flu shot. So local GPs and pharmacies. In that event, the municipality will be trying to do whatever we can to make sure that this rolls out smoothly, whether that's offering our community centers in terms of being able to have our GPs and pharmacies administer the shot, but that's still many months away. So a lot more to come, and we'll make sure that they're in our emergency management group from now on, or at least they're invited. And if it becomes relative, we'll come back to council with an update.
Thanks, John.
The other side of that, Jonathan, was the comment, what about getting people to the sites? And that's something that we're going to have to really talk about to make sure that people have transportation to get to these vaccination sites. And how many people are we talking about? Those type of things. We have to make sure we're ready. Okay. The other thing I would mention from County Council is we also chatted not just about the traffic lights, but county council is is not letting go. We haven't forgotten about those intersections in the county that seem to be too many accidents at them. You know, and so working with the engineer, if not traffic lights, then what? And so we haven't forgotten, we're not letting go of it. And I think the deputy mayor can agree with that. There was a pretty good conversation on that yesterday. And the engineer is he's going to be talking with Huron County, Lambton stuff. You know, they've got some of these pilot projects, what's working, what isn't, and some of the results of this. So county council is very much staying at that, to make sure we get some improvements, whatever they would be, at some of these intersections. I just wanted to mention that as well, that's a point of contention to make sure that we get that done. Anything else for the county, for the communications?
I can't think of anything, Mayor Rob.
Okay, so reading of the bylaws.
Thank you. So bylaw 18, it's a bylaw that will repeal the previous appointments under the building department. Bylaw 19 will appoint building officials from Middlesex Center. Bylaw 20 will appoint the same individuals under municipal law enforcement officers as well. Bylaw 21 is to amend the assessment schedule for McEwen Drain. Bylaw 22 is the new consolidated procedural bylaw. Bylaw 23 is your confirming bylaw. We're looking for first and second reading on all bylaws.
Councillor McClinchy and Councillor Keogh, all in favor? Carried.
And third and final for all bylaws.
Councillor Hemming, Councillor Nickel, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. I can't get to the next page here, they're stuck together. So really, we have no closed meeting, correct? There's nothing for close. And so all we're looking for is Doreen to put her hand up for adjournment. Moved by Councillor McClinchy, Councillor Keogh, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone.